Hello, welcome back to the Noise Gate Tone Lab. Today we are looking at a brand new pedal from Blackstar, the Department 10 Amped one or Amped one. We'll see. Let us know. What do you think? This is an amp pedal, hence the confusion about the name. What is an amp pedal and why would you need it? Well, an amp pedal is literally, in this case, a 100-watt amplifier that can go straight into a cab, but in pedal size. So it means it could sit on your pedal board or on your desk or be a spare backup. There are many, many uses that you could use this amp for, which we're going to talk about. But it's a very, very feature-packed amp. Let's check it out. Having a look at the ins and outs of this pedal, you can see on the back here, we've got standard guitar in and standard speakers out. Now we've got 8 ohm and 16 ohm cab outs. You don't have to use these though. This amp will run without them plugged in, which is automatically very useful if you are recording silently. We also have a regular kettle cord. Now, that might not seem that exciting, but let me tell you, if you forget to bring that to the gig, you can find them very easily to replace and use any one of them. So that's actually very cool. Also here, very, very useful is these two 9-volt outputs, 500 milliamps of output, so you can power a few pedals. You've also got a USB-C in for the editing software, and you've got MIDI in. Now there's an adapter that comes with this so that you can change presets, and there's loads of presets available to you via MIDI. On the side of the pedal here, we've got a headphone as well as a line out, TRS line out. You've got an XLR DI out too, which also has, both of them have this level control. Now that's very useful, obviously, to set your gain of your recording. And here you've got 3 cab rig places with this little switch that you can preset and save there. So to go between 3 different cab sims very easily on the fly. All editable via the software. Oh, and I forgot to mention, of course, that this has an effects loop in it. So you use TRS to mono cable, and you can run any effects in the loop of this amp, so after the preamp. Very useful if you want to use the drive settings. Of course, with any new pedal, what we really want to know is how does it sound? Before we dive into that, I want to talk about the way that we've got this set up. This is, as I said, a very, very versatile pedal. And so the way that we've actually got this set up is I've got a Source Audio EQ2 and an Exotic BB preamp running directly into the front of this amp. And then I have this TC electronic flashback delay in the loop of the amp. Now this loop requires a split stereo to mono cable, but it means that you can use the overdrive of the amp and have the delay in your loop. Very, very cool. As the bonus, which I talked about before, we've got these pedal power outputs. So at the moment, all of this is run with one kettle cord plugged into this, which is extremely, extremely useful. If you're ever at a situation where you are low on power or you're low on space, this covers a lot of bases for you. First of all, let's talk about the different settings that we've got on this amp. There are 3 voice types, and I'll start with the flat. Flat is simply designed, and then the linear sort of power setting here, the response, simply designed for something like an amp modeler, and this to be used as the power amp for that amp modeler. That is relatively self-explanatory, and so we're going to skip over that one a little bit, but nonetheless, it sounds great, and it's 100 watts. If you've got your Fractal or your Line 6 or whatever you're running into it, you can use this as your power amp. The first setting that we've got at the top of the voicing here is a USA, which is kind of in that clean, Fendery sound. And the second voice setting is UK, which is obviously sort of a little bit Marshall-y, a little bit Voxy, and has a bit more gain in it. Over here in the response, we have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different, 6 different tube settings. So we've got KT88s, something like a Marshall Major or a Hiwatt 200 had KT88, so huge, loud, high headroom amps. 6L6 Fender Twin. EL34, of course, is Marshall, pretty much anything. We've got 6 V6s, which is again maybe like Mesa, maybe more Fender type sounds. And then finally EL84s, which is sort of Vox World. Now these are all pretty broad strokes, but nonetheless, these are the sort of responses that you get. The tube sounds are kind of a little bit more driven as they go lower here. So the EL84s I found had the most kind of compression and drive, whereas the KT88s, all the way back over there, were a little bit more open and had a little bit more headroom. Of course, you've then got a 3-band EQ, and over here we have got a 1 watt, 20 watt, and 100 watt setting. This is obviously very useful if you are playing at home and you want that cranked Marshall sound, but you have maybe not a sleeping baby, but certainly neighbors that you don't want to upset. 1 watt setting is great. Now, let's say you're playing at Wembley Stadium, 100 watt setting through a 4x12 like this, you're covered. Sounds great. For all of these sounds, we're going to be using this at 20 watts. And you'll also hear us flip between the cab with the mic on it in the room, plus one of the direct outputs of the pedal itself. The software that comes with this enables a lot of deep editing of the cab sims. We are just running one cab sim and just as a comparison of the two sounds. But maybe another video in the future will go into more about what the software can do for this pedal. Let's start with a Fender-y sort of sound. So I have got the USA voicing, I've got my EQ relatively flat, and I have got 6L6 settings. Neck pickup, bridge pickup. It's a great sound. Now, no Fender amp is complete without a dense spring reverb, but luckily, that's exactly what we get here. So let's have a listen. If you'd like to be Dick Dale, or if you're more modern, if you'd like to be Khruangbin. It's a really, really nice sounding reverb, as you can hear. Let's go to a sort of maybe a little bit more of a impossible amp, shall we say. We'll keep it in the USA setting with an EL84 tube. So if you want all of that Vox compression in a clean Fender-y sort of sound, you can do that. So it may be hard to pick up, to hear, but certainly the feel as a player is that response of the amp is quite a bit squishier with those EL84s. Which adds a nice bit of warmth. Let's check it out if we put some pedals in front of it. What everyone wants to probably know with a amp that you can put on your pedal board is how will it take my pedals? Let's start with the BB preamp. We're going to turn this on, drive. Everything's relatively flat, but you'll hear that the amp sounds really great with any pedals in front of it. So, BB preamp. Let's try without the reverb. Clean. Sounds pretty rockin'. Now, if I were to go back to the Fender-y sort of sound and put an EQ on the front of it, push the front end a little bit more, let's see how that might affect the tubes. So, I'm back on the 6L6 Fender Twin sort of setting. Then, no EQ. Let's hit the front end of the amp a little bit harder. So you can hear that just pushes the volume really nicely. Now let's flick over and do the same thing with the EL84s. Now I found with this that the EL84s got a little bit more drive in a really nice way. So let's check it out. Clean, no EQ. Now with the EQ. So you can see it's still got that same volume push, but there's just this really nice drive coming out of that amp now. Let's check out some UK sounds. So I'm going to flick over to the UK and EL34, so we're kind of in Marshall territory. We all know Marshalls are famously bright, so I'm going to back a bit of bass off. And everything's pretty much the same as it was before. Let's hear the sound difference. Now, this is where your classic rock lives. Which on its own is already a really, really great sound. Now, I can dial that gain a little bit more, and I get obviously more gain out of the amp. But what I think is cool is checking out how this reacts with pedals in front of it. So once again, I'm going to dial that gain back a bit. We're going to throw that EQ in the front. Now the EQ is just smashing the front end of this amp. There's a little bit of a notch in the lower mids, but pretty, I mean, relatively flattish EQ. Nonetheless, a gain boost. And let's hear what it does. So no EQ, which is a great rock rhythm tone. Then EQ. Now, again, that'll help you cut through the mix beautifully, but you can hear that the amped one is really, really dealing with that very well. We can really dial the volume up of that EQ and really hit the front end of the amp, and it will just respond like a real amp would. Have a listen. Which I think sounds awesome. A very, very usable tone. Now, while we're in UK setting, let's go to kind of Vox land. I'm going to dial the mids up a bit, and I'm going to put it on EL84s. And let's have a listen. Oh, a bit of reverb too for a Vox sound. And which I think is a really, really great Voxy sort of tone. Let's be real here. It's not a Vox, it's a Voxy sort of tone. But it's that beautiful Voxy mid-rangey compression that you probably know and love if you're a Vox player. Now, again, let's go to let's maybe do something like a high watt. So I'm in the UK setting here, and I'm going to go back to the KT88s. I'm going to go a little bit flatter on the EQ, and I'm going to dial the gain back a bit, maybe some reverb. And you have this sort of big, slightly driven, but big sound, you know, which is very, very responsive to the touch. So, lightly playing. So my volume's on full, my tone's on full. Lightly playing. And then as I dig in a bit more, which is exactly how you would expect an amp to respond. Finally, let's have a listen to the effects loop. So I'm going to go back to a Marshall-y sort of sound. I'm going to crank the gain a bit. And I've got this TC electronic flashback that is in the loop, and we're going to have a listen. So, probably don't need reverb, hey. Marshall. Very, very cool. Now, obviously, you can put as many pedals in the loop of this as you want. Let's just, for the hell of it, because everyone wants to know, what happens if you turn everything on at once? Let's see. Drive and EQ. As you can hear, this is a great sounding pedal. I am having a lot of fun playing it, that's for sure. Throughout the video, you may have noticed we've been going between, I should say, the mic'd cab in the room and the direct output of this, which both sound great. But which one do you like? Let us know below which one you think sounds better and how you think you might use it. So let's talk about how I have used or would use this pedal. Number one, how I have used it. When I was demoing this pedal at home and checking it out, I had it sitting on my desk and I needed to do a recording for somebody. It needed to be done that afternoon and all my gear was in the car. Now, I'm lazy and I couldn't be bothered getting it out. So this was already sitting there and I thought, I'll just use this and see how it sounds. And let me tell you, it sounded awesome. I was able to flick between a couple of different settings and get the sort of voxy sound that I wanted for that recording very, very easily. And it sounded really good. Number two, how I would use this. That fits in the front pocket of the gig bag, of my guitar gig bag, right? If I really was in a pinch and let's say my amp that I was using went down and I needed to quickly have a replacement, that's sitting there ready to go. Now, because it sounds so good, I might just choose to use that the whole gig anyway, but its physical size makes it very, very able to fix problems. Which leads me to the third way that I would definitely use this. If you are doing a festival gig or you're doing a gig where there's backline provided and you rock up and you see whatever, Fender Hot Rod Deluxe or something and you think, great, and then you go and you plug into that backline amp and the last person to play it had broken a tube or something, and it sounded terrible. Well, that's where this guy comes in. You just take the speaker out of that amp and you can use this, which you've easily been able to carry with you to the festival and plug that in, and that's the sound that you get because you're used to this sound. You can dial in your tone and your festival gig will be good. There's nothing worse than playing a bad gig through a backline amp because it sounds terrible. This gets rid of that problem. As always, stay tuned for more from NoiseGate. We want to thank Blackstar for giving us the Amped 1 to check out. Let us know what you think of it in the comments below. You know what to do. We'll see you next time.